The night Lorraine Dupree saved a man's life, she didn't think of it as saving anyone. She thought of it as doing the only thing a person with eyes and a conscience could do. She was 31 minutes into a double shift at the Meridian Grand Hotel in New Orleans when she noticed the drink. Not her job to notice drinks. Lorraine was housekeeping, had been for 6 years, ever since her mother's medical bills started stacking up like bad weather on the Gulf. She pushed her cart down the 14th floor hallway, kept her eyes forward, kept her head down, the way she'd learned to do in every room where powerful men sat with their backs to walls and their hands on tables. The Meridian catered to a specific kind of guest. Old money, older debts, the kind of men who looked at a woman like Lorraine, 26 years old, 260 pounds, in a grey uniform that was never quite the right size, and saw the furniture. That was fine. Lorraine had made her peace with being furniture a long time ago. What she hadn't made peace with was being stupid, and what she saw in Suite 1407 when she knocked twice and pushed the door open to replace the towels while the occupants were supposedly at dinner was not something a stupid person would miss. The cart stopped at the threshold. Lorraine's hand stayed on the handle. 2 glasses of bourbon on the side table. One had been poured for several minutes. The ice was starting to melt. A faint waterline forming above the amber. Normal. The other glass sat untouched, just placed there in the last few minutes, ice still crystalline. The liquid a shade too dark for the same bourbon. Not noticeably different. Not if you weren't looking. Lorraine was looking. She stood in the doorway for exactly 4 seconds. Then she turned her cart around and walked back to the elevator. She told herself she hadn't seen anything. She was good at that, at building the small necessary fictions that let a person get through a shift without their hands shaking. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, she almost believed it. Then, the elevator opened and she saw him. Aurelio Voss was not a man who blended in. That was the first thing anyone said about him, usually in a whisper, usually after he'd already left the room. He was 42 years old with the kind of face that made people think of old sculptures, hard edges, dark eyes, a stillness that didn't read as calm so much as contained. He wore charcoal tonight, no tie, jacket open, and he moved through the Meridian lobby the way water moves around stone, not flowing so much as deciding. 4 men flanked him at a distance. Anyone watching would think they were coincidences. Lorraine watched him cross toward the elevator bank. Watched the man walking beside him, a wide-shouldered blonde in an expensive suit, already reaching for the up button. The man leaned close to Voss and said something low, and Voss nodded, and Lorraine's stomach did something complicated and unhelpful. She thought about her mother's hospital bills. She thought about the envelope of cash she had to drop at the landlord's office by Friday. She thought about how none of that would matter if she opened her mouth right now, about a glass of bourbon in a suite she had no business being in a hotel where the guests did not appreciate being noticed. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Lorraine Dupree stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. The wide-shouldered man turned first. His expression said, "You have 3 seconds to explain yourself before you become a problem." Lorraine had seen that expression before. She kept her eyes on Voss. "There's something wrong with the drink in your suite," she said. "The second glass. The one that was just poured." Nobody moved for a moment. The lobby noise continued around them. A couple checking in, a bellman with a brass cart, a piano player in the far lounge running through something melancholy and half-remembered. Voss looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her. "And who poured it?" he said. His voice was unhurried. New Orleans had done something to his accent. There was still something Eastern European underneath, old and deliberate, but the city had softened the edges the way it softened everything eventually. "I don't know," Lorraine said. But it wasn't room service. The cart was still in the hallway. Another silence. The wide-shouldered man. She would learn his name was Stoker, had turned fully toward her now, one hand inside his jacket in a way that meant something. Voss raised 2 fingers. Stoker's hand came back out. "What's your name?" Voss said. "Lorraine. Lorraine." He said it like he was filing it somewhere. "Come with me." She didn't go up to the suite. He didn't take her there. Instead, Voss led her through a door marked staff, only that she knew led to the hotel's secondary event corridor, and she had a brief wild moment of wondering how he knew the hotel's staff layout better than she did. Then she remembered what kind of man he was, and it made sense. There were 2 other men already in the corridor. They moved into positions and she understood were not accidental. Voss stopped walking and turned to face her. Up close, the stillness was more pronounced. She had the sensation of standing near something that was only quiet because it had chosen to be. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he said. "Don't interpret it. Don't soften it. Just what you saw." So she told him. The 2 glasses, the color difference, the ice, the fact that she hadn't been supposed to be in the suite at that time. She'd gotten the turn-down schedule wrong, arrived 30 minutes early, knocked and entered because the Do Not Disturb light wasn't on. She told him all of it without looking away, because looking away felt like flinching, and she had decided somewhere between the lobby and this corridor that she was not going to flinch in front of this man. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The glass on the left or the right," he said. "Left, closest to the window seat. That's where I sit," he said. Not to her, exactly. More to himself. Then he looked at her, "Tell me," and there it was. The question she'd been asking herself since the elevator, the question with no good answer that was also a safe answer. Lorraine took a breath. "Because I saw it," she said, "and I couldn't unsee it, and whatever you are, whatever business you're in." She paused. "That's not my business. But somebody in that room tried to make it permanent, and I was the only one who noticed." She paused again. "That seemed like information you should have." Voss studied her for a long moment. "You knew the risk," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I knew the risk," she confirmed. "And you told me anyway." "I told you anyway." He was quiet for another moment that felt longer than it was. "Stay on this floor tonight. Don't go to 14. She nodded. Turned to go. "One more thing," he said. She stopped. "The man who walked in with me. Do you know who he is?" She thought about the wide-shouldered blonde with his hand inside his jacket. "No, his name is Caldwell," Voss said. "He manages the hotel's private accounts. He's the only person who had access to that suite today besides housekeeping." He paused. "And you were 30 minutes early." She understood what he was telling her. "Convenient," she said. "Very," he agreed. And then, so briefly, she almost missed it, something shifted in his expression, something more like recognition. "Go to work, Lorraine." She went to work. She changed 16 sets of towels, restocked 11 minibars, turned down 8 beds, with the little foil chocolates on the pillows that she'd always thought were a sad attempt at making strangers feel welcome. She thought about what Caldwell must have been counting on, that Voss would come upstairs, sit in the window seat the way he apparently always did, reach for the drink, the way a man reaches for something without thinking. She thought about all the things that happened to people who were not noticed, who were not watched, who everyone assumed saw nothing and knew nothing and felt nothing. She knew that feeling very well. At 11:15, she was restocking a linen cart near the ice machine on the 10th floor when Stoker appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked toward her without hurry. Lorraine kept folding a pillowcase because her hands needed something to do. He stopped 6 feet away. "Mr. Voss would like to speak with you," he said. "Am I in trouble?" she said. Stoker's expression didn't change. "No." "Is Caldwell?" A pause. "Caldwell is no longer employed by the Meridian Grand." Lorraine set the pillowcase down. "Okay," she said. The room they took her to was not the suite. It was one of the smaller conference rooms on the 2nd floor. the kind used for private dinners and meetings that didn't appear on the hotel's public calendar. There was coffee on the table, which she had not expected. There was also a woman she hadn't seen before, dark-haired, 40-ish, with the posture of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything years ago. She sat at the end of the table with a legal pad and didn't introduce herself. Voss was standing at the window when Lorraine walked in. He turned when she entered and gestured to a chair. She sat. He didn't. "I want to understand something," he said. "When you came to me in the lobby, you hesitated first, on the elevator." She looked at him. "Were you watching me?" "I'm always watching," he said. It wasn't a boast, just a statement of how he existed in the world. "You stopped the cart on that floor. You stood in the doorway. You went back to the elevator, and then you got off again and came to me. What happened in between?" Lorraine thought about that envelope, the hospital bills, her mother sleeping in the apartment on Frenchman Street with the window unit that worked only when it felt like it. "I thought about what was easier," she said finally, "and then I thought about what I could live with, and those weren't the same thing." The woman with the legal pad wrote something down. Lorraine resisted the urge to look over. "The easier thing," Voss said. "What was that? Pretending I didn't see it, going home, keeping my job, and the harder thing." "You already know what the harder thing was," Lorraine said. "I did it." He almost smiled. She saw it, the very edge of it, there and gone. "You're not afraid of me," she said. "I'm afraid of plenty of things. I'm afraid of my mother's next oncology bill. I'm afraid of my landlord. I'm afraid of what happens if my shift supervisor finds out I was in an occupied suite off schedule." She met his eyes. "You're less scary than my electric bill." The room was very quiet. Then Aurelio Voss pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, and for the first time since she'd seen him in the lobby, he looked like a man who was tired. "My organization has a problem," he said. "Several people knew I would be in that suite tonight. Caldwell is the most obvious candidate, but Caldwell is not a man with the nerve or the intelligence to orchestrate something like this independently. He had help." He folded his hands on the table. "I need someone who moves through this hotel invisibly, someone who notices things that other people in expensive suits do not think to notice." He paused. "Someone with no obvious connection to me." Lorraine looked at him for a long moment. "You want me to keep my eyes open," she said. "I want you to keep your eyes open," he confirmed. "And in exchange," he named a number, a monthly number, said quietly, "the way people say things they know are serious." Lorraine thought of her mother's oncology bill. She thought of the window unit. She thought of how many times in her life she had been looked through instead of at, and how useful that had turned out to be tonight. "I want something else too," she said. He waited. "I want your word that if this goes sideways and I end up in the middle of something I didn't sign up for, you get me out clean. Me and my mother. No questions, no complications." He didn't hesitate. "You have it." "I'll need that in writing," she said. The woman with the legal pad looked up for the first time. Voss looked at Lorraine steadily. "All right," he said. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of Lorraine Dupree's life, which was saying something, because her life had not exactly been a straight road. She kept her schedule, showed up for every shift in the grey uniform that was never quite the right size, pushed her cart through the same hallways, changed the same towels, left the same foil chocolates on the same pillows. But now she listened differently. She noticed which rooms were booked under names that didn't match the guests inside them. She noticed which members of the hotel staff received envelopes from guests and which envelopes were thicker than others. She noticed a man she'd never seen on the staff who appeared twice near the private parking garage and carried no hotel identification. She passed everything to Stoker, who appeared at irregular intervals with the dedication of a very professional ghost. She didn't see Voss himself until the second week, and then only briefly. He was moving through the lobby with a group of men in suits. headed toward one of the private dining rooms. And he didn't look at her. She was standing with her cart near the pillar by the concierge desk, and he walked past within 12 feet of her and gave no sign that he had ever seen her face. She understood that was the point. What she did not expect was the thing that happened on the way back from that encounter, which was that she found herself thinking about the look on his face when he'd said, "You have it." The surety of it, the absolute lack of performance, and feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, which was the sense of being taken seriously by someone who didn't have to. She folded that feeling up carefully and put it away. She was practical, Lorraine Dupree. She had been practical since she was 14 years old and her father left, and her mother got sick, and the world made clear that sentiment was something you could not eat for dinner. But she thought about the look on his face. More than once. The man she'd been watching near the parking garage was named Ostrov. She didn't know that until Stoker told her after she'd seen him a third time, this time in conversation with a woman she recognized as the hotel's director of security. They'd been standing near the service entrance, and the conversation had ended with the director handing Ostrov a room key that he didn't put in his pocket so much as absorb. She described the interaction to Stoker in the same ice machine alcove on the 10th floor. Stoker relayed it to wherever Stoker relayed things. 48 hours later, the director of security submitted her resignation. Lorraine found out from the morning shift supervisor, who told the story with the slightly breathless quality of a person who suspects something is wrong but can't name it. She listened and nodded, and went back to folding towels. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she'd never saved but had memorized anyway. Useful eyes. Vichy stared at the text for probably longer than was reasonable. "You're welcome," she typed back. Then deleted it, then typed it again and sent it because she had never been the kind of person who unsaid things once she'd decided to say them. 3 dots appeared. Then, smart woman. She put the phone in her pocket and went back to work with something complicated happening in her chest that she chose, temporarily, not to examine. The trap was set on a Thursday. She didn't know it was a trap when she walked into it. In retrospect, there were signs. There were always signs, Lorraine was learning, in the world that Voss moved through. But she had not been in that world long enough to read all its signs yet. She had been asked via Stoker to observe a private dinner on the 14th floor, not to enter any rooms, just to be in the hallway doing what she always did, taking note of who went in and who came out of the corner suite where Voss was meeting with 3 men from Chicago, whose names she'd been told once and forgotten deliberately. She was changing out a linen cart at the end of the hall at 8:47 p.m., when a door she did not expect to opened. The man who stepped out was not from the Chicago meeting. He was someone she'd never seen before, mid-50s, heavy-set, with the careful blankness of a man who had practiced not looking nervous for decades. He looked at Lorraine and her cart with the automatic dismissal that she had spent her entire career being grateful for. He turned left away from her and walked toward the service stairs, and dropped something in the fire extinguisher cabinet as he passed it. The drop was seamless. 2 seconds. A man touching the wall as he walked. If you weren't watching his hands, you wouldn't see it. Lorraine was watching his hands. She waited until he was through the stairwell door. Then she walked to the cabinet, opened it with the maintenance key that every housekeeping staff member carried, and found a phone. Small, cheap, the kind of device that existed only to be used once and discarded. She stood there with the phone in her gloved hand and thought about a dozen different things very quickly. Then she walked to the door of the corner suite and knocked 3 times in the pattern Stoker had told her to use if she ever needed to use it. The next 7 minutes were not something she would ever describe in detail to anyone, because they happened too fast and with too much noise, and included a hallway confrontation that ended with Stoker putting the heavy-set man against the wall, while two other men she'd never seen materialized from what appeared to be the ceiling of the building. She stood at the end of the hallway and watched and held the cheap phone in her gloved hand and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Voss came to her when it was over. He walked down the hallway toward her, and the people around him moved to give him room, and he stopped 2 feet away and looked at her and said nothing for a moment. "You didn't run," he said. "Where would I run to?" she said. "This is my floor." Something moved across his expression. He was supposed to go through the fire cabinet in the opposite direction and plant this phone in a room that would have connected me to a federal inquiry. Our security had a gap in coverage between 8:40 and 8:50. Someone told him exactly when to move. "Someone in your organization," she said. "Someone very close to me," he said, "for a long time." He looked at the phone, the window closed. "I was watching his hands," she said. "I know," he said. "I saw the footage." He reached out and took the phone from her carefully, the way you take something that matters. "Lorraine." She waited. "I have been in rooms full of people whose job it was to watch for things like this," he said. "People I paid very well. People who trained for it." He paused. They were looking for someone who looked like a threat. She understood what he was saying. She had spent 26 years being invisible. She knew exactly what she'd been made of by a life that kept looking past her. "They made the mistake of looking past the wrong person," she said. "Yes," he said, "they did." And then he did something she did not expect, which was that he turned to face the hallway. The men, the contained chaos, the carefully managed aftermath of something that could have gone very differently, and said, in a voice that carried, "Everyone in this hallway owes this woman their evening and possibly more. Remember her face. She is not housekeeping. She is someone I trust." No one said anything. They didn't need to. Lorraine Dupree stood in the hallway in her grey uniform that was never quite the right size, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the peculiar and overwhelming sensation of being fully seen. Later, after the floor had been cleared, and the statements had been given to people who were not police, but who apparently served a similar administrative function, Lorraine sat in the small conference room again with coffee she hadn't touched, and her hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. Voss sat across from her again. The woman with the legal pad was not there this time. "Castellan," he said, the name of the man from his organization, the one who had told Ostroff when to move, who had given the heavy-set man from the stairwell the information he needed, who had been, as Stoker told her afterward, close to Voss for 11 years. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." He made his choice. He looked at the untouched coffee. "You should drink that." "I'm not sure my hands will cooperate right now," she said honestly. He reached across the table and pushed the cup a few inches closer to her. A small gesture. She picked it up with both hands and drank. "You're going to stop working here," he said. "Not a question." "I figured as much," she said. "I have a different position in mind if you want it." He folded his hands. "My organization has operations that require someone who understands how buildings work, how staff move through them, what gets noticed and what doesn't." He paused. "What gets overlooked?" "You want to hire me as what exactly?" she said. "Someone who sees things," he said. "Someone I trust. The title can be whatever makes administrative sense." She thought about her mother, the oncology bills, the window unit. She thought about what she'd felt in the last 3 weeks, the strange, clarifying sensation of being useful in a way that was particular to her, to the specific combination of things she was. "I have conditions," she said. "You usually do," he said. And there it was again, that almost smile, that edge of something that wasn't quite warmth but was adjacent to it. And Lorraine Dupree decided, looking at Aurelio Voss across a hotel conference table at 11:45 p.m. on a Thursday in New Orleans, that she was going to let herself be curious about what it actually was. "My mother's medical care," she said. "Full coverage, private provider, no interruptions. Done I work my own hours. I'm not on call 24 hours. Negotiable, he said, but reasonable, a real one, not a storage room. He looked at her, steadily. You want an office? I spent 6 years sharing a break room with people who never learned my last name, she said. Yes, I quiet for a moment. Then he says was, corner window. She blinked. Sorry? The office, he said. Corner window, better light, less noise from the street. He said it the way he said most things, without performance, without excess, just a thing he had decided. She thought very briefly that she might cry, and then decided absolutely not. Okay, she said, corner window. Is that all? He said. She thought about it. She thought about 6 years of grey uniforms and foil chocolates and hallways full of men who saw the furniture. She thought about what it had cost her to walk off that elevator. She thought about what it was worth. For now, she said, I'll have more conditions later. Aurelio Voss picked up his coffee cup. I expect you will, he said. And Lorraine Dupree, 26 years old, 260 pounds, daughter of a woman who had fought for her life on a street in the 9th Ward, picked up her coffee and drank it, and looked out the window at New Orleans, spreading itself out against the dark river, lit and humming, and full of things that people walked past every day without seeing, and felt, settling into her bones, the quiet and particular satisfaction of a woman who had been underestimated for the last time.